All right. So just quickly, I'm going to kick it off. We have 1 hour, so the time is tight. Thank you, LebNet donors and subscribers, for joining this exclusive roundtable discussion. It is thanks to your contributions that we are able to provide our impactful programs and initiatives. Thank you to our guest of honor, Habib Haddad, for sharing his expertise and knowledge with us today. As I said, this event is recorded, and please stay muted if you're not talking. I'm going to do a quick introduction on you, Habib, and then I'll turn it over to you, and then we'll proceed with our guests. Habib, we're very grateful.
Good.
Is that okay?
Yeah, perfect.
All right. We are very grateful for your time and proud of your accomplishments. Habib Haddad is currently LebNet's chairman and has his own Wikipedia page. He is a serial entrepreneur, an early-stage investor, and a social activist. He is currently the president and managing director of E14 Fund that invests in MIT spinoffs. His investments include many companies like ThruWave, Formlabs, Kiwi, Figure 8, and many others. And Habib has also founded a number of tech companies, including Wamda, Yemli, which was licensed by Yahoo in 2012, and Yalla Startup. I love all the names, amongst others. He has been named by the World Economic Forum as a young global leader in 2009 and as a top innovator under 35 by the MIT Technology Review. Through his work in the MENA region, Habib is credited with playing a key role in strengthening its entrepreneurship ecosystem. Habib holds a BSCCE from the American University of Beirut and an MSEE from USC. With that said, Habib, anything you'd like to add?
No, you embarrass me. So thank you so much, Janine, and great to be here with everyone. Great to see familiar faces and meet new ones. I'm excited for today. I'm excited that it's also this casual, intimate format. Happy to go through any topics you might have on your mind. But maybe I can give you kind of my quick intro, which is less, a bit more, under a bit more maybe on the ground, and then Janine's very generous intro. But I'm moved here about 20 years ago from Lebanon, and right after I moved here, after AUB, I came across some interesting work at MIT that I helped join and spin off a company from MIT. Since then, I've caught the entrepreneurial bug. And fast forward, actually, that company, we ended up raising money from the wrong investors, and all of us founders had left, and then most of us have kind of, fizzled out, but still remained in touch. And then I worked a bit in semiconductor. And then as soon as I got my green card, like most maybe immigrant founders, I then started a new company, which ultimately sold. And then in 2011, this weird confluence of events made me act a part of something really interesting in my life, quite special, which was everything that's happening in the MENA region around the Arab Spring Revolution. So many of the folks that were there leading revolutions in Tunisia, in Syria, and in Egypt, at least on the social, on the development social media side, were close friends. And unfortunately, the one in Syria also, like we realized, we discovered a few years ago, he was executed by the Syrian regime. But that whole experience, to me, while being in Boston, we launched something called Speak to Tweet during the Egyptian shutdown of the internet. If you remember, we had flipped basically using phones to leave tweets on using your phone number, and we were working with Al Jazeera to put these numbers on TV, and it was this whole thing that came up with an idea, and then very quickly through volunteering efforts had hundreds of people join in and translate and help out. But this whole experience to me, despite the outcome being quite disappointing, made me realize how amazing the energy is in the MENA region, and in particular around in getting empowered, the new generation of geeks and developers being empowered and doing things. And that made me move there for a few years, where I started, I was based out of Beirut, but traveled around and started a media company, ultimately venture fund. Spent about 5 years, but my geeky, sciencey side always pulled me back to Boston. So in 2016, I came back to Boston to continue the work I've started on E14 Fund, where we invest in early stage deep tech startups out of MIT. So we're quite privileged to back some really interesting science and work with founders across. So that's quickly, my journey. And I know that many of you have already submitted questions, but maybe we can go around the room and say a couple of words, and then also what brings you here, and maybe as something that's maybe a different question is say something that inspired you this summer. Anything that has anything and everything basically goes, but always good to talk about something that's not necessarily part of our resume.
I love it. Thank you, Habib. Are you okay with us going around the room in alphabetical
Yeah.
order by name, just so that we make sure we give everybody 5 minutes, because we are tight on time. So like Habib said, free format. If you want to stick with your question, go for it. If not, throw whatever you want at Habib. Go ahead. We'll start with Andre Haddad. A quick introduction, please, about yourself, your profession and location, and then dive into your question.
Hello, everybody. Great to be here. Habib, so nice to see you again. Ted. I'm the CEO of Turo, the world's largest peer-to-peer car sharing company. Delighted to be here, and just asked you a question about not necessarily kind of your space or tech in general, but rather about Lebanon. I was back in Beirut in February for the first time in 12 years. I surprised my dad for his 80th birthday. And while that part of the visit was really special, of course, my heart was broken throughout the few days I spent there seeing the state of the country. So I was just curious if there was any good hypothesis for some optimism for Lebanon, and I'm curious what that hypothesis would be. Thank you.
Thank you, Andre. Andre is amazing. I've been admiring Andre's work for a long, long time. I got the chance to meet him a few years back at a conference, and everyone thinks we're brothers. We have the same last name and the same haircut. Yeah, Andrea, that's a great question, and something I've been thinking a lot about over a number of years, and I flip-flop a lot between Boston and Beirut, but also over the past few days, there have been a lot of recent things that have been made me much more anxious, particularly around freedom of speech. A lot of the stand-up comedians have been called into kind of court. Also, LGBTQ community has been you have all the political apparatus kind of trying to distract everyone, create rifts. It's been just this ugly turn of events over the past few weeks. That said, I am hopeful. I'll tell you why. So a lot of my friends are activists on the ground still, and I'm in touch closely with them. And obviously, a lot of folks have left. That's the sad part. But everyone who's on the ground has been fighting, and they've been fighting creatively. And it's a thing where you're far and you read that the meta news makes you much more depressed. But I'm involved at AUB, for example, on the School of Engineering. And the dean there, Alan Shahade, is amazing. He's an amazing human being who's doing some really interesting things. And there's a lot of great students emerging from AUB. And he's been launching a few initiatives. So, for example, one of the last initiatives he launched was around helping the soldiers in the military to get upskilled on coding, simple coding, to get to freelance, so for web development or simple things like that. So there, like every time there's that squeeze, you find on one side you feel that emergence of creativity on the other side. The other thing that's also been making me quite optimistic over the past few weeks, I got the chance to meet a student at MIT. He's a PhD student. His name is Hadi Salman, and Hadi is this. Many amazing students at the UB, but he was super inspiring. He's like an amazing top AI scientist. Got recruited by OpenAI before his PhD, actually defense, and he's like one of the top folks in AI alignment, which is a big issue right now. Obviously with AI. And he's basically said, my dream is to do OpenAI for a few years. I'm going to go back to Lebanon. I'm going to set up a research. I'm going to convince OpenAI to give me some money to hire a team there. And so every now and then I come across these optimistic slivers. The macro is pretty depressing, and I'm not sure what's going to happen, and I'll be fooling myself to be optimistic on the macro. And I think the micro has been fighting, and at some point, hopefully, it will win. Today, I think it's in that standstill situation. But every time I get to meet and work and talk with folks that are doing stuff on the ground, I get more optimistic. Though I agree with you, the sentiment of the past couple of years have been more of a bittersweet feeling because of people leaving and that kind of situations coming into place in Lebanon with everything that's happening. But that said, I still am optimistic. I mean, all the stories I mentioned are just a sliver of the many stories I come across often.
That's wonderful, Habib. We will hang on to your optimism for sure. We'll turn it over to Daniel Natour.
Hey, can you guys hear me fine?
Yeah.
Awesome. Habib, thanks for joining, and hello, everyone. I'll give a quick introduction. My name is Danny. Right now, I'm a consultant at this management consulting firm called Kearney, where we focus on a bunch of strategy and operations, transformations, and sustainability. A little bit of background. I also studied computer engineering. I went to Queen's University. I started most of my life actually in Qatar and Lebanon. I grew up there. I was born in California, and then now I'm in Toronto, Canada. So kind of on the triangle, trying to figure out where do I actually want to stay for the next couple of years. To your question, something that inspires me. I'm a huge basketball fan. I played competitive basketball my whole life, and I tore my ACL last year. So this summer, seeing one of my favorite players come back from a 2-year ACL injury and then to win the NBA championship, that was something that really inspired me. You can go through one of the most gruesome injuries and still bounce back every single day, and you can win a championship. So that was awesome. I know we have 5 minutes per person, so I'll be quick with my questions, and feel free to answer it however you want. So I just want to be fair for everyone else that they get their time. My first question is more so around relationships. I think you've been around a lot of different areas, different geographies, industries, and it sounds like from the experiences you've had across businesses, there's always probably been a couple people there that supported you, and that the relationship that you've built over time. So first question is, how do you go about building relationships, and what is your sort of kind of most practical advice for someone younger in their career to do so? And then the second question, if there is time, is given that you do a lot of things and you have spent a lot of time on various parts of industry, whether it's deep tech, whether it's E14, et cetera, how do you prioritize your time? And what's the kind of the number one thing that really speaks to you every day and you wake up, you're like, that's the thing I want to focus on. So however you want to spend the next 2-3 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, very, very good question. And I think maybe I'll start with something abstract, and I'll come to something practical. But building relationships has been key in my career, and obviously there's Andre on this call and Osama as well, who's been great mentor and supporter for a long time. And so relationships are extremely important. I think to me is for you to excel at that, there's some intentionality around positioning yourself and branding yourself. I'm not talking about the influencer branding of these days, but it's how will people remember you. In my world, when I was younger, I wanted people to remember me as, oh, that's the entrepreneur guy from Lebanon who's going at the Middle East. That was an easier way to differentiate myself among many others, because I was based in Boston. Not many people were doing that. Even in the Middle East, there was, one of the, maybe still is one of the first AI companies in the Middle East. So it was kind of the first, I had that kind of easy way to latch onto and build my brand around that. Even prior to that, you will always create a brand around maybe, just from you conversing right now, it feels like you're a high energy person. And so use that to your advantage, use that in the right directions. I think that plus there's the other thing of, I hate the cliches of like we Lebanese are good at XYZ, but culturally or whatever that is, like there's that thing about building relationships that we're, people at least that have lived enough in Lebanon know how to appreciate and live and do very, very well. I'll give you a very small example. Even up until now, I'm very intentional about relationships. Every month or so, I bring a group of about 20 top scientists, top donors and philanthropists to this private kitchen of a Syrian chef I got to meet in Watertown, here like in Boston, in the suburb of Watertown. And it's like to the whole experience about the cooking and the whole thing. And I get everyone to share a food memory before the dinner starts. So it's not about like who you are, what you do, it's about a food memory. People start sharing about their grandma, and they start sharing about maybe their kids, and people start building relationships. And so it's not about optimizing for a transaction, it's optimizing for a feeling. What do you want people to leave with that feeling for you? And for me, it was like, it's like, it's hard to describe, but I've kind of got the rhythm of what I want to optimize for people to feel. Maybe it's inspired, maybe it's energized, maybe it's intimate. I mean, those are the keywords that I maybe I'm just thinking out loud that I've been optimizing for. And also the branding. There's a nice book, an old book by Reid Hoffman called The Startup of You. And it's a nice book that talks about differentiating oneself and kind of thinking about your own self as a startup and kind of expanding from there. Sorry, what was your second question?
Yeah, no, thanks. Thanks for the answer on the first one. Second one was just more so, my understanding is that you spend your time across the day-to-day basis, so it's or maybe across the year. How do you sort of prioritize your time on the things that matter to you the most? And maybe if you want to share what. Right.
It's almost like every 6-7 years I've been changing careers, but it's whatever I take and I make it my number one priority to become obsessed about that, like for it to become me and me to become it. And I feel that that's the best way to really be good at it, but I feel it was the best way for me to be excited about something. So when I was doing Yemli, for example, it was all about the Arabic language. And by the way, I was the worst Arabic student and in fact, I know that for a fact because my grandfather, he wrote Arabic grammar books for the French Catholic school, and all the teachers would go and tell them like your grandson is an embarrassment to you, and I kid you not. So I became like an Arabic linguist expert, and then at WAMDA I became this evangelist of Arab entrepreneurship. Now I'm an evangelist of science and deep tech, and it's not that I am faking it or I'm just gonna try it. It's like I really embody that, and it's just really being authentic about understanding, removing the noise and focusing on what matters. So even for now, for example, as a venture fund, there's so many venture funds in the US, we don't even make any hypey splash. You don't even find us. But when you talk to our community, which is the MIT scientific community, like you'll feel how much they appreciate. They always want to work with us, whether it's recent alumni or someone who've left MIT 10, 20, 30 years ago. And that's been kind of one of the things that we've been really thinking about, and understanding of all the intricacy of how to move from a scientist, what we call a scientist brain, to a founder brain, and all these kind of things that we've been over the years, the past 5-6 years, kind of been thinking a lot about.
Great. Thank you
so much. Thank you.
We'll turn it over to Issam Sleiman.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Perfect.
Hi, everyone. My name's Issam. Thank you so much for joining us, Habib. We really appreciate it. So a little bit about myself. I was born and raised in the San Francisco Bay Area, and I studied computer science in my undergrad. And now I've just starting actually in 4 days, a master's at Harvard in computational science. So I'm actually now in the Boston, Cambridge area. And I think one thing that was inspiring was you brought up Hadi Salman. I actually attended his thesis defense 2 or 3 days ago.
2 days ago, yeah.
2 days ago. I don't know if you saw it as well, but it was very exciting, and I could really see his passion while he was talking about his research. But so the question that I had was, so a little bit more about my interest is that I've become very interested and have been doing research in deep learning for the past couple of years, and I plan to continue to do this. throughout my time in my master's. And my question for you is, in general, as you're an investor in what you would call deep tech and companies that kind of spin out of universities, specifically MIT, what do you look for in a startup that is created based on a student's research? And in general, like, how is the process for one to spin like a startup out of their own research?
Yeah. So the cliche is true. It's all about the founders, and it's absolutely true that at the earlier stages, and maybe becomes less so over there later on, but still, it's all about the team and everyone around it. And so for us, as our model is different maybe than other funds, but for us, it's about building relationships with founders early on. And what we look for is this persistent flexibility, this ability to be very intentional and focused on achieving some goals, but at the same time being very flexible and seeing around the corners. And that's kind of manifests itself in how you hire, how you think about executing for the next few months, how you think about the long-term plan towards potentially unlocking some customers, particularly if you are in areas where there might be a bit more issues to crack into customers. And it's less so about the actual body of work, the science, although obviously that's really important because it's kind of like the door opener, I would say, but it's not the be all and all, because there have been investments we've done in amazing science with founders that really didn't have the stamina to stay through or weren't the right fit. And there's investments into companies where the science was kind of very different from what it ended up at. In fact, just actually before this call, we had a session with a bunch of MIT students who want to learn more about science. Let me share my screen for a second, just to give you this actually interesting flow. So what you see here is this really interesting sensors that you put on someone's body, and it can measure your emotions. And the scientist here is a student of the godfather of wearables. And her intuition was that we can put these sensors on your joints, and then as you move, you can record your movement. So kind of to Danny's point, imagine you can record the top NBA players' movement and you can try to train like them. Really interesting science, really bad business. And over time, basically over the many different frictions and issues, it turns out that there's a big issue in musculoskeletal health, and doctors really giving a number and understanding, quantifying the pains that you have. And that's now a medical device with a CPT code, meaning you can be reimbursed by insurance. And it has the founder moved from a scientist to understanding all about healthcare and hiring people in that space. And now they live in about 8 states. And you can, if you have an injury, you can go and understand your progression over time. So my point here is that it's not about that the science early on. It's not about what they build, but it's also about the going back to the obsession about figuring out how to build a meaningful business around it. And that happens when you have the founder really exhibiting these early grit, personality traits and pushing through. And I think one of the more important pieces, a skill set that you'll have to learn as a founder, first-time founder, is hiring. That's going to be the biggest deterministic impact on where where the company would land at. That is the same skill set that you actually would use to get your first customer and your first investor. But that's something, going back to the relationship question, that's something as well that is I would encourage you to focus a lot on.
Great, thank you. Fadwa.
Hello, Fadwa Mhanna. I'm the founder and CEO of 137, and I'm based in Toronto since 2019. I'm originally a CCE graduate with Raja here on the call from AUB. I mean, naming it CCE apparently is a giveaway already because the name has changed, so it tells already how old you are. But the background is in technology. Spent my life in the telecom industry specifically before focusing on digital identity since 2015. and would like to building the most secure digital identity wallet that holds all your credentials, all your biometrics in a safe and secure manner, and would allow for continuous authorization identification as you log into your bank, to your airline, to your telco, to the government, etc. That would secure end-to-end all the communication and achieve digital trust. I am a part of LebNet Toronto steering committee. I work closely with Janine, and I have a big dream. The big dream, she knows, is that we are great, magnificent individuals. Everybody on this call is, by all measures, an exceptional individual. We do not come together and consolidate because of the lack of guidance, like similar countries, very neighboring countries to ours, to Lebanon, have a model of government-led innovation, startups, get them an early traction, get them funded. VCs are already aligned. The buyer is already aligned. Everything is on track. It becomes a startup nation. We in the Arab world, we lack this, if you want, this general vision to be a startup world, the Arab world, but we have magnificent individuals. And the dream is, it is not a centralized model. It could be a decentralized model of becoming a startup nation, which is based on coming of exceptional individual, Habib, yourself, Dr. Osama Hassanin on the call. I don't know if you remember me, Dr. Osama, but I visited you in San Francisco. You hosted me in your house in 2014. I had lunch with you and Mo Al-Bibani and Amin Al-Bibani at your place. And I would love to reconnect upon my next visit. But people like yourselves are so amazing, yet we remain of limited impact. Can a decentralized model, Habib, be made where we can replicate the centralized model based on the individual coming together? Because we as Lebanese learn to replicate the government, like we have our own generator, our own water, our own telephone, our own, because we know there is no government. So we learn how to decentralize everything. How can we come together and build everything from building the ideas, having the test, the traction, having the VCs, and like replicating all of that, because that's a machine, but we don't have all the elements of that machine. That's why we remain of very limited impact and very limited success.
Yeah, thank you for this. I mean, LebNet is a clear example of why this is needed even to scale. In fact, my first company in 2006, that's where I met some of my earliest investors, George Hari, who has been a great supporter, and then he connected me to a bunch of Sand Hill Roads venture funds that have no connection with Lebanon, but because he had made the connection, they very quickly came in. And that's kind of I mean, Andre as well on this call, when I reached out to him to say, hey, like, I'm a Lebanese founder, I'd love to kind of chat with you. So that thing exists. I think what we need to do more of is to help institutions like LebNet scale. So really thank you for all the work you do in Toronto. It's a fantastic job that you're doing for the community. I think by also trying to outreach and connect with other folks that are doing similar things. There's Life Lebanese in Finance. That's another organization that's doing great work. AUB, LAU, a bunch of other Lebanese in AI that Hadi probably Islam is on as well. So there's a lot of things that are happening, I would say, and I think now with technology, it's much less of an issue as it used to be, because the barrier towards starting something has become lower. So the younger generation is more excited, and the highly energetic is more excited versus when it gets to things where there's more conflict of interest or more personal interest, I would say. But I think in general, I'm optimistic we're on the right track. LebNet's goal this year is to multiple its efforts. The fellowship that Janine and the team have launched is an amazing program. There's many others as well in the making. So I would say I'd flip it back at you all and say, please continue supporting LebNet.
I couldn't agree with you more, Habib. Thank you. Our goal, Fadwa, is to make your dream come true, which is centralize and unite all of us and move us forward. So thank you so much for bringing that up. Next question, Ibrahim.
Hey everyone, thank you so much, Habib, for all your insights so far, and everyone for this very engaging discussion. Just to quickly affirm what everyone has said about Hadi already, I met him briefly at a conference in Vancouver and had a very similar spike in motivation. Amazing guy with an insight for actionable motivation. Thank you, Habib, for also sharing the wearable piece. That's very interesting to a project that I'm working on right now with what we're referring to as an invisible UI. That's on the side. My name is Brahim. I'm a partner at Mostar Ventures, which is a security and defense firm, a VC firm out of Vancouver, BC, Canada. I have a PhD in IoT and AI applications, and well intertwined with the startup world as a founder myself as well. So my question is centered at, we've seen a lot of bold statements from investors and companies claiming that AI will almost definitely replace jobs. We're not talking about assistive skills to some extent. We're talking about replacing actual jobs. We've seen people saying that they will actually replace doctors, with an example of replacing an oncologist, for example. In your opinion, do you agree with such assessment? And where do you anticipate the demand lies for jobs related to AI within the next 5-10 years?
Yeah, great question. I think obviously there's a world post GPT-3 that has been quite mainstream and fast moving, and has led a lot of people to question their jobs and what's going to happen to them. There was even a period where there was a lot of high rate of depression that was pointed out to in CS students at Stanford, for example. And there've been a bunch of MIT students who reached out to just brainstorm and think about their future and what that means to them. Now, fast forward, you talk to the same people, it's not as existential as they thought it would be. In fact, it's augmentative. For sure, there's going to be a period of some types of jobs being affected and maybe some being replaced. Think of customer support, for example, or chat, or people that are assistive on chats, and things where jobs like that are more repetitive. I think, though, when it comes to doctors, when it comes to even despite the fact that generative AI can create a lot of amazing insights, I still find it very hard to believe that this is going to happen. I mean, most of our companies are on generative AI, and they are serving the healthcare sectors, manufacturing sector, customer support, even robotics and drones. And so far, everything is pointing to the fact that it's being adopted and brought into. Over time, I think there's going to be a shift, and some jobs over the next 10 years will be jobs that we never knew existed. We already have big pays for prompt engineers and new types of jobs that are being created with AI. But I think I wouldn't be as alarmist as if we had this call maybe 8 months ago, where people were just wrapping their head around it and understanding what that means, and coders were worried that's going to eat into their jobs. I think at this point, as people are figuring out and wrapping their heads around it, it's becoming a quite powerful tool. For example, we have a company in our portfolio called Overjet that's using AI for dentistry, and they augment dentists to understand the treatments that have to be done. Does that mean it's going to be AI going to replace dentists? Of course not. Someone at the end of the day is going to have to take a look at these and understand the whole context and talk to you and understand what you want to do and then do the treatment. And so it's augmentative, and it's normalizing, it's standardizing the care, but it's not replacing. So I would say definitely embrace and learn and play with the tools, and keep it close to heart of thinking what kind of career this might impact your career. But I wouldn't go as far as saying it's gonna destroy jobs in a way that's going to be very hard for us to come back from.
Agreed. Michel Haddad.
All right, Janine, thank you for setting this up, and Habib, thanks for being on the call. So my name is Michel Haddad. I grew up in Orange County, California, and I would spend my summers in Beirut, Lebanon, like many of the Lebanese in the U.S. So I'm the co-founder and chief commercial officer of Sonova Life Sciences. We make a device that extracts stem cells from fat in 3 minutes with no enzymes. So I don't have a formal bio background. I taught myself cell culture, and I'm also the outbound guy of the company. So I raise venture capital and work with all the key opinion leaders that we work with. So I split my time between Southern California and the Bay Area. I'm an alumni of Y Combinator and Stanford StartX. Andre, I believe you gave a talk for all the YC batches a couple months ago that I attended. Habib, my question for you is kind of general. What is the best way to help the entrepreneurial ecosystem in Lebanon?
Yeah, thank you for this question. And congrats on all the success as well. Awesome to hear about the company. There's a few nodes that I would suggest you look into. AUB Innovation as a program called Innovation Park, and that's I'm on the board of that park whose goal is to help spin off companies from AUB, but also AUB alumni. So that's one, and there's a lot of openness to involve mentors. Beirut Digital District, BDD, is another program, is another basically physical space. It's one of the largest spaces in Lebanon. It's pretty nice, actually. If you haven't been on your next trip, I'd recommend you go. There's also a lot of startups there, and there's a bunch of programs, accelerators that are based out of there. So I would say some of these programs, outreaching to those. I think now practically what kind of help they might need, they come in different flavor. You have some of the startups that are focusing on the MENA region, MENA market. So a successful story would be Anghami, and that's the Spotify of the Middle East, and that started out of Lebanon. Maybe the help would be more just sharing best practices. But then there's also those who are based in Lebanon and going at the international market, and maybe there you can be more helpful, particularly with helping with pitches, helping with reaching out to customers if there's an overlap of customers. And lastly, I would say, going back to LebNet. LebNet has a very good also group of Lebanese founders and first-time founders as well that have maybe recently moved from Lebanon or a few years ago. I think there you'll find that it'll be a pretty awesome value add as well. That's much more easier to do that as well, given just folks are just at that stage where they can apply some of the advice you would give. And so I would encourage as well, if you haven't done that, to reach out to Janine and see if you can get plugged in and mentor a couple of those.
Yeah, I would love to be involved in any of the things you mentioned. So thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely, Michel. Let's connect after this. We partner with a couple companies as well who work with entrepreneurs and welcome a lot of mentorship.
Great. We'd love to chat after this.
Awesome. So no relationship with Habib.
Habib or Andre, no relationship.
As far as you know,
All right, we turn it over to Muhammad Itani.
Hello all. My name is Muhammad Itani. Thank you, Janine. I studied at LEU, computer engineering, and right when the incident happened in Lebanon, my wife applied for a French teacher in San Francisco, and she got accepted, and we moved the whole family on a J1 visa here. And I successfully joined Apple after studying a lot, working as a senior technical project manager. And then I decided to leave Apple and work on my startup. So currently, I'm working on something similar to Google Lens. it is like a speeded a way that that we can do object detection in a very fast manner. So, for example, any new object that you have, we can automatically detect it and show it on a mobile where you can purchase it or view its PDF file, for example, or specs. Now, the thing is that I have no idea, as maybe Janine tried to poke a bit about that. I have like no experience in the venture environment. Everything is being done by myself. The thing is that my question is how to be able to scale such an application without jeopardizing quality. So if I give now this technology to a fashion designer who is building his new dresses, how can I make sure that he's using the tool properly and to be able to scale it and have this technology being used, like as for example Shazam for audio? It will be something similar to computer vision.
Yeah, it sounds like a very cool technology, and I think obviously probably now with all the advance on edge computing, probably even going to be much more powerful over time. I would say a couple of things. One is it'll be great if you can over time find collaborators, co-founders. I think founding a company can be quite lonely, and particularly someone that you over time can start being soundboarding things with, and potentially even complement your skills. So that's much easier said than done, because a lot of the issues early on, like co-founder issues, happen quite frequently. But I would still encourage you to keep that in mind as one of the goals that you hopefully might reach or not. Doesn't have to be a co-founder as in half the company, but someone enough to be as a sounding partner. Number two is you want to think about your own strength here. So the platform we described, Google Lens like product, has a pretty broad use cases. It could be used in pure consumers or like a fashion designer, but it could also be used in a much more defined setting. I'm going to throw something out there. It might not make sense, but call it like, let's say, in manufacturing, around something very specific, very well defined, where the value creation might be higher in dollar amount, but the customer segment might be smaller. Starting with a very wide customer segment is a mistake that you'll end up taking a lot of your effort and time, and you end up just spreading yourself too thin. You want to almost think about the narrowest market you can own, starting early on. My personal bias is particularly kind of you describing your background is around finding a B2B, so more of a kind of an industry or healthcare or something where customers there's more of a path towards a larger deal and a PO, and mainly because the pure consumer play will require a bunch of marketing spend, will require a bunch of competing against noise. Today, like so many apps are out there. So to the extent you can figure out what that is, that aligns with maybe a few contacts you have, maybe a few interests you might have, an unfair advantage. So basically try to figure out what your unfair advantage is beyond the tech. And try to start poking there and scale. Ultimately, the last big point I want to mention is it's also a very personal question. What kind of life do you want to lead? Because as in, like, do you want to scale this company and have hundreds and thousands of employees and go for venture investment and go through ups and downs, but maybe go for a big win? Or would you like to try as much as you can, protect your downside, not necessarily aim for the huge win, but get a nice small business going on there? And I think based on either, it might also indicate type of a different path you might take. Maybe the starting path might be similar, but the mindset will be very different.
Okay. Do you consider, for example, like Home Depot as a B2B client? For example, if you have like a broken sink, you just take a snapshot and it will tell you this is the replacement or this is the PDF file for it.
I think so. I think the reason why I say I think so is because it is a B2B customer. I'm just thinking about what that means in terms of people paying for it and what the scale of usage of pictures of conversions you need to take before you start creating meaningful revenues, or if Home Depot itself is going to be a customer and they buy something from you and that's like you enable a platform. I think if Home Depot is a customer, these kind of customers are like the big names and the big. I'm a bit anxious about them because for a very small company, they end up being a waste of time, and they entering into them is a pretty convoluted way. Unless you know someone well on the inside, it ends up being big customers and end up being the worst actually to have as first customers. You could come to them a bit later once you have a bit more of a leverage, but early on they end up being a waste of time.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, happy to. I mean, it seems like a question that might need more offline conversation as well.
Yeah, thank you.
Great, thanks, Habib. I turn it over to Noor, who, unlike the Haddads who are unrelated on this call, I am proud to call Noor a far-removed relative, but we're still relatives. Go ahead, Noor, with your question.
Yeah, I'm proud of you too. Thank you. Thank you, Habib, for giving us some of your valuable time. It's nice to listen to you and talk to you. This is a great opportunity. So to introduce myself, I did my undergrad at AUB in mechanical engineering and applied mathematics. And then I'm here at UC Berkeley doing my PhD. This is the start of my third year. And I've started being involved in some startup work. We're still in the very, very early stage, not yet started actually. So I would like to learn more about like what's your portfolio like in terms of investing in companies, in new startups, and how early do you start and what are your criteria in general? Anything would be very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Congrats on the jump, and happy to also help out later on as well as things evolve. So we, as a fund, we designed the E14 Fund like everything I just mentioned right now, in terms of advice to Muhammad in terms of figuring out your edge. Our edge has been MIT, so we have an official partnership with MIT, and we focus on the MIT community. We focus on MIT founders, MIT scientists, and we invest beyond those as well. But it's rare. It's almost like the exception and extremely rare to do. But the way we think about our investments, we invest in deep tech companies. So deep tech around the areas of climate, industrial automation, and healthcare. And cross-cutting would be infrastructure plays, whether it's software or hardware infrastructures. And the way we think about our investment is we usually write $1 to $4 million investment as a first check, and we leave money in reserves for each company. And the way we think about our first investment is, can we help unlock some of this early go-to-market whereby towards 12 months or so post the investment, there's some meaningful milestones that could help the company unlock more capital for this next phase of growth. But also going back to some of the maybe subtext of your question, venture funds usually wouldn't want to take too much scientific risk. So science has to be de-risked at the university side, and then it's more about figuring out this early customer pool. It doesn't have to be that you have a product market fit or a well-defined customer segment, but that early customer pool of saying this is a pain point, and with a few conversation with investors, be on the same page. I would also encourage you to do as much diligence on investors as they would do on you, if not more, because it's really important to make sure that you're aligned with the VCs you're working with, and there's that founder focus. A lot of funds say that they're founder focused, and that's kind of their brand, but many of them end up being quite destructive to families in the background. So the easiest way is to find companies in their portfolio that they didn't suggest that you talk to, maybe some that have failed, and ask them what they think and see if there's been some exhibits of bad behaviors. I would say some VCs, like one of the questions you want to ask the VCs as well as you're thinking about is, do they lead, would they follow, particularly at this early stage? Like, would they be the ones putting the terms, or would they be the one joining around? All of these things will ultimately help you create, understand the world you're working with. Last thing I would say is that fundraising is a kind of an art and a bit of science early on, and becomes more science and less art as the company grows, meaning creating a process, very much following up, very much being on top of it, and then, but it's working a lot for a shorter process, but it's basically getting all the materials ready, not sounding too eager, but at the same time creating that format. There's a lot of those subtleties to be done there, basically to give you the upper hand, but at the same time to create that sense of interest that's happening around your project.
Thank you, Habib. We have 4 more guests and we have 8 minutes. Do you have a hard stop, or can we go 10 minutes over the hour?
Okay.
All right, great. Thank you so much. Our next guest I am honored with is Dr. Osama Hassanein. I was telling everyone earlier that Dr. Osama is Egyptian, but he's been an amazing supporter of LebNet and a great champion for Lebanon. So with that, Dr. O, I'm honored to turn it over to you.
Oh, thank you very much. I am passionate about Lebanon, and I meet with the Lebanese every Friday at home, and I continue to repeat the same highlights. Success is failure turned inside out, the silver lining on the clouds of doubt. And we never can tell how close we are. We may be near, yet it seems so far. So let's stick to the fight when we are hardest hit. It's when things seem worst that we mustn't quit. And in the case of LebNet, it's an awesome organization. And when I look back at 2010, when we launched Takwadi here in the Bay Area, the C100s in Vancouver, British Columbia, the Mohammed bin Rashid Innovation Fund in Dubai, Enterprise Qatar in Qatar. The thing that made a very big difference was the commitment of maybe in each one of these initiatives, a minimum of 100, typically 120 mentors to help entrepreneurs and innovators and universities and hospitals and schools and what have you do 2 things: accelerate their development and benefit from the innovation that we have here in Silicon Valley. And the bottom line in the case of some is that we would, for example, in 3 years, with the support of the Skoll Foundation, end up with 17,000 jobs created in 3 years, $1.2 billion of funds raised. So with that in mind, I would say, as far as Lebanon is concerned, and particularly Habib, how can we help?
Yeah, thank you, Osama. Great to see you again. And thank you for all the work that you've done for the region and for Lebanon for the past number of years. Honestly, we should ask you how we should help, because you've been also quite active at this. And I've had the chance to talk a lot and answer some of these questions, but maybe I'll flip it back to you. Like, what do you think LebNet can do that we are not doing?
Well, if you look at people like Khalid Nasser and Eddie Tabet and Asif Malouf and what have you, if we were to agree that via LebNet, we will actually engage not only in visiting the country, but in being connected to organizations, to the setting up of maybe a business accelerator, to help entrepreneurs, particularly with innovative ideas, particularly the innovations that have a measurable human impact, be the examples of what it used to be. Because quite frankly, when it comes to the election of a president or a prime minister. It's absolutely mind-boggling what has been going on and what is going on at this point in time. Yeah. So with that in mind, I'm hoping that with LebNet, we will help entrepreneurs in business acceleration. And at the same time, as you know, we usually would get some of them to come and stay with us at home for 3 months to become interns during the summer. Surprisingly, not a single one of them did not end up being hired.
That's amazing. Well, the last time I chatted with the Dean of Engineering at UB and I asked him what else can we help with, because we had launched this entrepreneurship program at the UB to help with kind of accelerator of students. And his response was, honestly, it's now students are not as much focused on entrepreneurship, not because they don't want to be entrepreneurs, but they're focused on figuring out a way out of the country. And so one of the things we were brainstorming is let's embrace that. I mean, it's bad, it's sad for Lebanon, but that's instead of, they're going to figure out a way to leave whether they're being helped or not. But if LebNet can play a role in helping students, whether have a better application process for PhDs or whether a softer landing into jobs, given the talent that comes up from the different universities, that is one I think program that we have yet to double down on, but I think could be quite powerful.
I agree with you, but if I may add one last comment. When I look back at what I've been engaged into, I would say learning to cooperate with the objectives and the key results in mind has been far, far more impactful for me than getting a PhD.
Great thoughts. Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. O. Turn it over to Pierre Khawand.
Here we go. Yeah, thank you, Janine. Thank you, Habib. This has been very inspiring. Back to what you asked us earlier, Habib, what's inspiring. This meeting itself is very inspiring. And also a little story. I was in Lebanon a few weeks ago. I mentioned that earlier. And I was really inspired by the people who are coming back to do some amazing projects, and including little personal story. One of my cousins who's coming back from France, he's quite established there, working at a very high level at a winery. He wants to create a winery in our village in the south. So he's coming back to create that. So that's very inspiring. And I'm so looking forward to more of those stories. So I'm gonna make this short. I know we're a little short on time. So my interest right now is mindfulness at work and how to bring mindfulness to help solve all kinds of problems, and also how mindfulness can help guide the development of AI. And I'm just first wondering if you have some thoughts on that mindfulness and AI and the development of those two. And then my other part of the question is what recommendations or tips or organizations you know of who may be doing fundraising for mindfulness related products and services, because that's not the typical, it's not the typical ROI that VCs expect. So are there any ideas or organizations you know of?
Yeah, this is really interesting. I do think that mindfulness is going to become much more important than before in the age of AI, in the age of also being just bombarded with different tools. There's been a bunch of work at MIT, actually. There was a monk, Tibetan monk, let me actually put it here. His name is Tenzin. He's been working on, he's been figuring out things around AI and mindfulness and being present. I'll try and find more links for you, but I think this is a good kind of starting point. I think the solution is, in my opinion, is not going to be necessarily a tech solution. It's going to be more of a human solution, and it's like maybe a philosophical point. But I think as more and more tools are going to be thrown at us. I think there's going to be more importance of being present in mindfulness, and also the importance of liberal arts and arts in general and culture. I think, unfortunately, if you extrapolate over the next number of years, my view is that we're going to have two sets of people: those who can afford being immersed in art, and those who are just struggling to survive. That's kind of a dystopian view, if you may. But I think to avoid that dystopian view is how can we promote mindfulness and promote the importance of it in a way maybe that's not as Silicon Valley-like, because I think the Silicon Valley way of mindfulness, I feel, is a bit too transactional, kind of too much, like if you follow Brian Johnson, the guy's been wanting to get younger. It's kind of a bit too much, like, it's that whole mindfulness, being more mindful so you can be a better CEO, I think is the worst thing. Probably being mindful to be a better human is the one we should think about. So I think hopefully it'll be, that's why, by the way, I love being on the East Coast. I know many of you are calling in from the Bay Area, but I feel that the East Coast has more balance when it comes to humanities and science. And but yeah, I think I do agree with you that it's something that should happen more of. In terms of folks fundraising for it, I think there's going to be more and more interest in it. I don't know. I'm sure like there's a bunch of philanthropists that are going to be quite active. There's even the company that I just came across not too long ago. I'll try to find it for you. That has been they've been creating this workflow that helps you focus and be much less distracted and mindful. I'll try to find. I'll write it. It's called Focus on Space. It's here. Here it is. Just if you're curious.
Great.
Oh, yeah, thank you for the question.
You. Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Pierre and Habib. Turn it over to Raja Ghanem.
Yes. Hi, everyone. Hi, Habib, and thanks again for giving your time to us. And really, it's wonderful to meet the rest of the attendees. Your stories, as Pierre mentioned, are beyond inspiring. Just thinking here, looking at all the stuff that, Dr. Hassanein, you did, and Habib, you're doing. Michelle, I'm your neighbor. I'm in Orange County, so I hope to get to meet you in person sometime. Just quickly about me, I'm a scientist turned business leader, manager, if you will. Been in medical devices and healthcare technology for over 20 plus years. I have a PhD in biomedical engineering focused on cardiac imaging and arrhythmias. I did a short stint in scientific roles of about 7 years and then moved into business. Currently, I'm lead the product marketing team at TerraRecon, which is a software, medical imaging, and AI company. So Habib and others, as you're thinking about starting your own AI ventures, we at TerraRecon, we're looking at it more holistically across a variety of medical specialties. So we're partnering. So if we're connected on LinkedIn, you'll see we're announcing a partnership almost every week. But I also have entrepreneurial desires. I'm a co-founder of a medical startup that's developing class 3 implantable medical devices. And we're raising a seed fund right now, looking to get the first of humans soon. Michelle, I volunteer with the Innovation iPark. Habib, I just want to share with you that I was in Beirut last 2 weeks in June, and I got a chance to meet with startup cohorts from the iPark. I went to the BDC, and I almost had like a switch. I was thinking, and to your point, Dr. Hassanein, the dire economic situation, the dire finance situation, the dire political situation. I'm meeting with these startups and leaders. They're not necessarily young, they're almost, my age and et cetera. And they're actually basically deciding to start a company and launch a company despite all odds. And I thought to myself, I have no reason not to get involved, right? So that's why I'm really excited to be a part of LebNet, as well as the AUB chapter in Orange County. My question to you, Habib, is specific around the MENA region, given your expertise. And I know your expertise is more in deep tech, but I'm curious about your thoughts about what needs to be true? How can we advance and successfully launch healthcare technologies, medical device startups in the MENA region, if that's even at all possible?
With the focus on the MENA region or the focus on global?
whatever you prefer. I mean, I'm interested in knowing. I've spent 3 decades working on global markets. I can't claim I know it all, but I'm just curious, like, what are the niche, to your point earlier, what are the niche segments that we could possibly focus on to advance healthcare technologies in MENA? If there's
I mean, I think if you're going at healthcare, I would say it should be a global market, not a MENA market. But and I know of a number of companies that have built some really solid foundation teams in Lebanon. So one of the LebNet awardees, Nadine Hashash, has started Proximy, which is a way to enable surgeons to annotate from remotely as and augment other surgeons in the OR room. Really amazing company. Another friend of mine who his name is Jean-Claude Sarbini, based in Boston. They had a company called Wavemark way back when, an RFID company for medical devices, long-range RFID, so that you can track medical devices in a hospital. That company got acquired, ultimately got to Cardinal Health. He said he wasn't even a UB grad. He came here for undergrad, and he said he had the best team because he's been just taking a lot of AUB, CCE, and it's like you have the system engineering side, the computer engineering side. So you're well trained and you're well ready for that. Another successful story in Lebanon, not in healthcare, but in semiconductor, out of all fields, is Fadi Daw, a company called Multilane. And Fadi is actually, I've known him. We started the equivalent of LebNet about 20 years ago in Boston called Inlet. And so Fadi has a pretty successful company that does testing devices. Apple and Google and Microsoft are his customers, and Nvidia, and they're pretty they're top. And he started that company in Humel, and I've never been to Humel, somewhere apparently in the Shuf area in Psous. He built a really nice campus there. If you Google it, Multilane, and you look at the images, you'll be pretty inspired by it. So what I'm saying is that double down on the talent. And when I was talking to him first, I thought he was crazy. He had moved from Boston back, not for the move, but he was crazy to think that he can actually build something as deeply sophisticated as expertise, where you don't have other companies training that. You have to train everyone and build everyone yourself. And I've been proven wrong, happily proven wrong. The company is doing really well. And ultimately, you build really loyal teams when you do it this way. And you're able to pay, and you're able to kind of train. And so over time, you kind of create an unfair advantage, arbitrage cost, and purely from a business perspective, right? So I think there's a lot of potential there if you really put your head to it. It will take time. Because it's not, you have to create the infrastructure for your company and the internet and the electricity and all of that stuff. But if you do it well, and if you have the patience for it, like Fadi had, you'll need to have your own capital too. I would suspect, because it's hard to start that from VC money.
So where do you think the capital will come from in these early stages?
You might find capital from like the IFC or World Bank or EBRD, some of the European or international banks that are looking for development, where they want to. It would be enough funding to be helpful, but honestly, this funding is also slow. So in a way, you want to also have a plan before that, because the funding is not going to be the most frictionless, basically, I would say. Because it just comes a lot of conditions. It's normal with this stuff. Yeah.
Very good. Then we turn it over to Rami Haddad, our last panelist or participant today.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for this opportunity. My name is Rami, and I'm a financial analyst based in Boston, and I'm also a fresh graduate with the master's degree in finance and fintech. I'm here to learn more about your experience and curious about investing in startups. So my question to you, Habib, is as an investor, if you decide to expand or diversify your portfolio, would you invest in promising startups in Lebanon now, taking into consideration the current economic situation in the country?
I think, I would say, based on everything that has been mentioned so far, I would say the fact that they're in Lebanon is not a deterrent. The fact that they're in Lebanon is a kind of a starting point of understanding whether it's being used as an advantage or not. And so what I mean by that is this is purely talking from a investment perspective, not necessarily from giving back or supportive, etc. And so purely from that perspective, you would say about, is there good talent? The answer is yes. Is there a good infrastructure? The answer is no. So are you able to hedge against that? Is there a good market? And then all the other questions, I think, become more company specific. And so I would say Lebanon-based going after a global market absolutely sounds exciting. Lebanon-based going after the Lebanese market, probably not. And even after the MENA market, at least from my view, I mean, MENA market is quite big. And if you asked me 6 years ago, I would say all for it. But having lived that and lived now my current investment hat, I would say MENA market is interesting, but it has to be, the bar is much higher than investing in a global market.
Thank you, Habib, so much for your generosity with your time today. Any last thoughts from your end, Habib?
No, I think I thank everyone for being engaged and present, and the great questions, and looking forward to seeing more around LebNet. And hopefully, this next couple of years for LebNet are very critical. Up until now, we've been bootstrapping LebNet. We've been, Janine has been doing amazing work as the only full-time person at LebNet, and we've been really excited to see what we can do next as we scale some of the programming that we've been doing, and it has worked well. And I think now is more than ever, more critical than ever, that we do that. So Janine, thank you so much. And thank you everyone for being so present and so active.
Thank you, Habib, so much. I want to close out by going back to the first question about being hopeful and optimistic for better days for Lebanon. And I want to tell you that I am optimistic by looking at all of you, at your journeys, your resilience, your persistence, and your great passion to technology in Lebanon. Thank you so much for participating today. Thank you, Habib. I'm very grateful for all of you.
Thank you.
I will close. Take care, everybody.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you.